some noise for Orange Juice and a Blunt.
Whoreson, the story of a ghetto pimp. Six. After being awake all night and most of the weekend, Jessie and I were in a hurry to get home to bed Sunday morning when she finished work. The square working people in the neighborhood had started drifting by on their way to church, dressed up in their Sunday best. We passed Milton with his parents coming down the sidewalk. He winked at me, but I refused to acknowledge it, since he was damn near grown and still too frightened to speak when he was with his mother. His mother made some kind of comment, "What a shame," but we were walking too fast to hear all of what she said. Jessie seemed as tired as I was. We ran up the stairs to our flat. She was halfway undressed before I could close the door. Her blouse was tossed over the back of a chair, and she had wiggled out of her skirt and tossed it on the couch. I was in the process of running her some bath water when somebody started banging on the door. Before I could get there, Jessie opened the door, wearing only her half-slip and bra. Tony rushed into the room, with tears streaking his cheeks. "Jessie," he sobbed. "You gotta come, Jessie. Mom's done took a overdose, Jessie, and ain't nothing I do seems to help her." For the first time in my life, I realized that Tony really cared about his mother, though there had never been the harmony between them that there was between Jessie and me. From the many times I'd been over to his house, I had yet to notice anything other than indifference between the two. Idly, I wondered how Jessie would refuse to go. I knew she didn't particularly care for Tony's mother, especially not enough to go back out after working all night. To my surprise, she simply turned and began to put back on her skirt and blouse. Unexpected as this was, even more surprising was the fact that she hadn't even cursed. In less than 10 minutes, we were climbing the steps to the 4-room apartment where Tony lived. The door was already open when we got there. The woman who stayed across the hall was standing in the doorway, crying. She looked at Jessie and shook her head. "It's too late, honey. She done passed away." Tony rushed into the bedroom. Jessie and I followed silently. There wasn't anything anyone could do for her. She lay on the bed, decently covered, with her eyes open. Even for someone as inexperienced as I, the awareness of death in the room was inescapable. The tears that Tony shed seemed inexhaustible. Tears rolled down Jessie's cheeks, smearing her makeup. Everyone was crying, but me. I turned and left the bedroom. This was a new experience for me, and I was really shook up. I needed some fresh air to remove the smell of death from my nostrils. Without stopping in the living room, I crossed the carpet and opened the door leading to the hallway. Before I could get through the door, 2 burly policemen came marching into the room. Behind them came the elderly couple who lived downstairs. "Is this the boy?" the last officer asked the woman following them. I shook my head. This time, I knew I wasn't the boy they wanted. "No," she answered. "That ain't him." One of the officers went into the bedroom. In a few moments, he reappeared with Tony and Jessie. Before long, the apartment was full of people, most of them police officers. Jessie went over in the corner and talked to a detective. I saw her write out something on a slip of paper and hand it to him. Then she came over and herded Tony and me out of the room. We walked back home in silence, Jessie in the middle, with her arms around both of us. The sadness of the occasion overwhelmed us, leaving room for sleep only. The week following the funeral, our way of living became to some extent more orthodox. Jessie stopped working at night and got a daytime job in a cleaner's. She wouldn't allow Tony and me to gamble anymore. Plus, we had to be in the house by 8 o'clock every night. We were becoming frustrated by this imposed curfew, and this frustration showed in our relations with Jessie and everyone else. Jessie was responsive and sensitive to our feelings, but she would not tolerate any disrespect. She continued diligently with her job while making us walk a straight line. But all her efforts were in vain. After Tony had been with us for a week and a half, a policewoman stopped by the house. Tony and I had just come in from school. Jessie was still at work, so the woman put us in her car and drove over to the cleaners. The woman went into the cleaners and came out after a short while, followed by Jessie, who seemed to be pleading with her. It was the first time I'd ever seen her beg anyone. I hoped it would be the last time. The harder she seemed to beg, the more the woman would shake her head in refusal. Tony realized how useless her pleas were before I did. He opened the car door and got out. Taking Jessie's hand, he kissed it slowly. She turned and stared at him, surprised. "It's no use, Jessie," he said. "I'll always remember how hard you tried, though." She drew him close and wrapped her arms around him, tears in her eyes as she kissed him. It was like a hammer hitting me when I realized that Tony was being taken away. I jumped out of the car. We stood on the sidewalk and hugged each other, our tears flowing unashamedly. Had I known it would be years before we would meet again, I still could not have wept harder. After the woman left with Tony, Jessie went in and quit her job. On the way home, she tried to joke about the job, but I believe in my heart that she would have stopped hustling and kept her job if it would have helped to keep Tony. Jessie bought a bottle of gin, and that night she got roaring drunk. At times she would laugh and shout, at other times she would cry. When she attempted to go to work drunk, I went and got Big Mama, and she helped me bring Jessie home and put her to bed. For a while, I was consumed with loneliness. After my initial shock about Tony wore off, I resumed gambling and petty stealing. Had I been an introvert, I would probably have been more sensitive to my close friend's problem. But after really appraising the situation, I realized that sentiment was useless. Even before Jessie advised me to quit worrying because there was nothing we could do, I reached the same conclusion. In the slums, you have too many problems of your own to cultivate other people's trouble. Usually, I spent most of my leisure time on Hastings, but since I was becoming so well known to the hustlers who hung out on that street, I had to go farther to find my action. One day, I wandered into a small restaurant on Brush. A tall, slim, light-skinned woman was bent over, picking up some trash. I leaned on the counter to admire her legs better. She was bow-legged and wide across the rump. Her hair was raven black and hung down on her back. I knew she hadn't heard me come through the door, because it had become a habit of mine always to enter as silently as possible. She must have sensed my presence behind her, because she turned suddenly and caught me staring in fascination. She seemed startled at first, but her look was bold and penetrating. Suddenly, I became uncomfortable. She had dark green eyes, which reminded me of a cat's, and a long, keen nose. Her complexion was the color of burnt copper, and to me, she looked like the goddess of love. Usually, I could stare at a woman and make her drop her eyes, but this time, I had to drop mine. She seemed to undress me with those